We believe that Canadians deserve low taxes and bigger paychecks so that food and homes are not luxuries, but once again, the things that people can take for granted. You work hard for your money. It's time that your money started working hard for you.
A landslide victory that sets the stage for a highly anticipated face-off this fall. This is Power in Politics. I'm Karina Roman in Ottawa, where next month, Conservative leader Pierre will return to Parliament after winning a federal by-election in Alberta. What can we expect as he vows to take on Prime Minister Mark Carney? The party's deputy leader, Melissa Lantsman, is standing by. And the Air Canada strike is over. The Union for Flight Attendants says it's reached a transformational tentative deal. But there is fallout over the disruption it caused and how the government handled it. We'll hear from Canada's largest labour organization. And Russia launches its largest attack on Ukraine this month, hours after U.S. President Donald Trump hosted the Ukrainian president and European leaders. Is Vladimir Putin serious about pursuing peace? Later this hour, we've got analysis from Canada's former ambassador to Russia. Power in Politics starts right now. Conservative leader Pierre will be back in the House of Commons next month, this time as the representative for the Alberta riding of Battle River Crowfoot. In his victory speech, Poilievre said things may sound different.
Conservatives have our work cut out for us. This fall, as Parliament returns, we will not only oppose out-of-control Liberal inflation, crime, immigration, cost of living, and housing prices, but we will propose real solutions for safe streets, secure borders, a stronger and sovereign country with bigger take-home pay for our people.
After last night's by-election win, Poilievre can shift gears to the return of Parliament, where he'll face off against Prime Minister Mark Carney for the first time as members of Parliament. For more on what that will look like, I'm joined by Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party, Melissa Lantsman. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Can voters expect a different style of leadership when Poilievre returns to the House next month?
Look, I think that voters are going to expect that an official opposition in this country holds the government to account on, on the things that that they said that they were going to do and are not getting done, as well as propose solutions for Canadians to see that the Conservatives are a government in waiting, and we're happy to have Pierre back in the House to do that as our leader, united behind him with a bigger caucus and a very different Conservative coalition than we've had in the past.
Well, in his victory speech last night, he did talk about proposing solutions, about being willing to work with other parties. Well, does that shift include a shift in tone?
Well, look, I think that the proposals for some of what we said that we would do had we won the election, Mark Carney agreed with, and he took some of those things. And there are plenty more. You've heard from Conservatives. We're going to stand strong against the anti-energy laws that exist on the books, C-69, that stop pipelines and mines from being built. We're going to oppose the industrial carbon tax, things that are going to make us more self-sufficient, less reliant. There's no shortage of things to talk about in Parliament. We've got an insane EV mandate, and all of the things that were wrong, on the day of the election and before the election, out of control housing prices, unchecked immigration, a cost of living crisis, labor strife that we haven't seen in the last 30 years in this country. Those things are still there. So again, no shortage of things to talk about in Parliament when Parliament returns, and we're happy to have Pierre at the helm of that, squaring off with the Prime Minister.
Now, you mentioned a whole host of proposals in there, and I want to get to that in a moment, but I guess some of those are wrapped up in this Canadian Sovereignty Act that you want to put forward, and some of those are promises that I guess essentially, if you look at the results, were rejected in the spring election. So how do you move forward with proposals that that you actually want to get stolen if we're talking about ideas getting poached by the government?
We're very happy to see the Liberals take on conservative policies. I don't think that's a repudiation of policy at all. Look, I think that Canadians know that we are in a difficult situation when it comes to trade, when it comes to housing, when it comes to immigration, when it comes to young people trying to get into the workforce with high unemployment rates, when it comes to strikes and fair pay for work. These are the things that Conservatives will propose. We need to reward investment in this country, keep it within our borders. Things like a reinvestment tax credit or dropping the capital gains if you're going to reinvest that cash in Canada to bolster our industry, our communities, our families, and our workers.
So much of the success until the election of your party and your leader was in opposing the Trudeau government and the things that they were doing. Now we're talking about proposing. How do you ensure that Canadians give the Conservative Party credit if the Liberals do adopt some of your ideas going forward, if now it's about proposing and not opposing so much?
Well, I think it's still about, it's certainly still about both. There's an official opposition in this country, whether people like it or not, and it's a function of democracy. But let's not forget that we've built a coalition that Conservatives have never built before, or who have never enjoyed before. Unions, trade workers, young people, new Canadians, people who have never voted before, 41% and 8 million Canadians. We have the responsibility to speak on behalf of those 8 million Canadians that chose the Conservative vision going forward, and we've got to find ways to expand that coalition. So I think opposing has certainly a function, and expanding that base and that Conservative coalition to include more and more Canadians who are going to see the path to prosperity with our party and with Pierre as the next Prime Minister of Canada. That's what we're there to do. We're happy that he's back with the by-election behind us. We can look forward to Parliament and again growing that Conservative coalition in a way that we haven't before.
I hear what you're saying, but polling did show that, for example, on the consumer carbon tax, most Canadians gave Mark Carney credit for cutting that, even if they know in the background that for 2 years it was something that you have pushed for. Is there not a risk of that continuing to happen if, let's say, for example, EV mandates, that might be one of the more possible ideas that you could see a government adopting, because industry is also pushing for those to be dropped. Would it bother you if the Liberals get credit for that?
Gone, and for a long time in this country, there are many, many voices, including on your very show, that said that inflation had nothing to do with the carbon tax. And even today, we see a lower inflation number because of getting rid of that carbon tax. So we'll continue to advocate for the best case for Canadians, for the best policies for Canadians, to bring them forward and make sure that we check that unchecked government spending. We still haven't seen a budget. We know that these Liberals are spending more even than the last Prime Minister, who spent more than all Prime Ministers combined. I'm fairly confident that the Canadians will see our function as an important one in Parliament. And again, if Mark Carney wants to take our ideas, please go ahead, put forward Conservative ideas in this country, and really get down to fixing it.
We are seeing on social media, for example, today that Pierre Poilievre's wife, Anna Poilievre, today talked on, as I said, on social media about friendships coming and going and the ugly side of politics. Is that hinting at some kind of settling of scores? And do you think that rhetoric is helpful for your party moving forward in how Canadians see the Conservative Party?
Look, I think politics is not a linear path forward, and I think when you have setbacks or you don't get the result that you want, that you pick yourself back up and you get back on the saddle or back on the horse, and you do the job that you think that you should be doing in this country. And look, I think you'll have to ask Anna about what she means, but I can tell you that we're a united caucus, a bigger coalition, a new coalition and a party that's united behind Pierre. And again, we're happy to have him back at the helm, doing what he does best in the House of Commons and holding the government's feet to the fire as one of the most effective opposition leaders in the history of this country.
I'm wondering, though, from what you're saying, were any lessons learned from the non-linear path that has gotten you to this point?
Yeah, look, absolutely. After every election, whether you win or you lose, I think internally you take stock of what worked, what didn't work, how to change it, how to grow the party base. But we're never going to take away from what Pierre has managed to build with a Conservative coalition, one that I've never seen before, one where we have young people and new Canadians, unions and trades workers, families from coast to coast. We're not going to let down the 8 million Canadians that voted for Conservatives and for Conservative policies. And we've got to do both things. We've got to take stock of those lessons. Discuss them internally as a party, and probably not the place to do it on Power and Politics, but I'll let you know.
All right, well, thank you very much for your time. Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party, Melissa Lantsman.
Thanks.
As we've discussed, Pierre Poilievre's by-election win has set the stage for his return to Parliament. The Power Panel joins me to talk about what we can expect when the reminted leader of the official opposition and the Prime Minister face off in question period for the first time this fall. But first, the Air Canada strike is over. After 9 hours of talks stretching into the wee hours of the morning, the airline and its flight attendants have a tentative deal. We'll talk about the significance of that deal and how the two sides reached it next. Air Canada and the union representing its flight attendants have reached a tentative deal to end the strike. The Canadian Union of Public Employees says the deal will soon be presented to its membership. There haven't been many details on the agreement yet, but the union did say the contract puts an end to unpaid labor by flight attendants.
We're so happy that our flight attendants are going to get the industry-leading contract for Canadian flight attendants that they deserve. And we're incredibly happy that they're going to get the chance to have their vote heard and vote on the agreement. We're going to get the planes back in the sky. We're going to get our customers moving. And as a management team, if I may say, we know that we need to rebuild the trust and confidence of our customers and our 10,000 flight attendants.
Air Canada says flights will gradually return beginning this evening, while CUPE has advised its members to fully cooperate with resuming operations. The airline says it could still take 7 to 10 days to return to full regular service. Here to talk about the resolution of that strike is Siobhán Vipond. She's the Executive Vice President of the Canadian Labour Congress. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
What is your reaction to the news of a tentative deal? How significant is that?
It's significant. It's also good news. This is the purpose of negotiations. This is what unions are pushing for. Workers said what needed to happen, and they did it at the table as they should have been. And that's the win that we're seeing today.
Yeah. So when you say they did at the table, it's it wasn't because of arbitration in terms of binding arbitration. But CUPE did say today that, as I mentioned, unpaid labor is over for flight attendants, even though we don't have details of that. And Air Canada is saying that to CBC News today that it's an industry-leading deal on the table in terms of the ground work compensation. I don't know whether you know anything about the details of the deal. Can you tell us anything that you might have heard, or what might we expect to see in the deal that will be taken to members for ratification?
Yeah, I mean, the big one is and what we've been hearing about is that unpaid work won't fly, right? And so that's what's happened, is they are happy with the tentative deal and I think bringing it to the members because it does undo what I think most people are appalled for, right? It was what do you mean you're not getting paid? What do you mean we have to move? And especially in these days of planes sitting in tarmacs for a long time or sitting at the gate for a long time, it's and you're not getting paid. That is the most basic of what needs to happen. So we know that they've thrown that on the head, and they feel proud that they have gotten to a negotiated deal that they'll be able to present to their members. And so once we see what once the members have their say, then we will know exactly what those details are. But I think it is a good day when, unions, their members come together, they push back to make sure that they're getting a deal that's good for the job and good for them.
Okay, so it was 9 months of talks, many of those months stalled talks, 9 hours overnight into the wee hours. I know you weren't in the room, or I don't think you were in the room, no. We did see a statement from the Canadian Labour Congress earlier today saying essentially that you believe that what the pivotal catalyst was the CUPE being willing to defy the back-to-work order. Why do you feel that was the impetus for actually getting a deal?
Well, introducing 107 was an overstep by Carney and the government because they were interfering in the process of negotiations. So once that happened, they needed to back away because the idea of going on strike is to put pressure on. But we heard from the CEO of Air Canada, they felt no pressure because they were just going to make a phone call and get 107, and then they thought then it's just going to be done. So their goal wasn't actually to negotiate a deal. But then once those workers stood up and said, actually, no, we are going to take our right to strike, we're going to do it, and we're going to take our labor away, which is the power of workers, then guess what ends up happening is you have to go to the table, you have to find a solution, and the solution is a deal. So pressure, it happened, but that is the power of the negotiating table. And whenever government oversteps by introducing 107 like this, it is interfering with that process and the balance of power.
Now, last night on the show, Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu certainly didn't characterize it as an overstep or even a misstep. She defended it by saying that it was clear that Air Canada and CUPE needed another tool to finish the negotiations because both sides had declared an impasse. How do you react to that?
Well, I mean, I think the timeline, as you pointed out, which is like, there was months of it not happening. Then like last Friday, as we're so far behind, it's impossible to happen. Then they sit at the table and are able to get it in one night. That is showing that if they had been allowed to do the process of what, negotiations look like, which is, the passing of ideas, sitting at the table. But introducing 107 meant actually we're going to take away what that process is and making that the employer didn't actually have to go to that table meaningfully bargaining because they had this, the government's just going to help us get through this without actually negotiating. Because, decisions have to be made at that table. It's about going back and forward. It's about what's going to work, what makes sense. And the union goes in making sure to get a good deal for those workers. They were able to do it. And I would say the timeline shows you that if they had let it step aside, maybe that we wouldn't be having this conversation about after 3 days of people being stranded and Air Canada having no plan on getting them home. Maybe we'd be having a conversation, about this is what it looks like when people negotiate and get a deal that's good for everyone.
From a union perspective, I'm wondering whether you think there'll be any impact politically for this government because of its very quick invoking of Section 107, especially in terms of support from unionized workers or from Canadian workers. Will they pay any kind of price for having done that and then clearly last night not saying it was a misstep?
Well, listen, this is not what Canadians voted for. I don't think we definitely union members were not voting for someone who was going to interfere in the constitutional right to, free collective bargaining. And that's what happened in this process. So
does the announcement of the probe into unpaid work that the minister made last night make any difference? Does that mitigate things? Or
I mean, sure, have a probe, but why didn't you have it 9 months ago when they started and it was very clear that this was actually an issue? So we're having it now at a pressure point. What we need to see now is actually that 107 is struck from the labor code, because what we have to have is that we have to have laws and rules that mean that government is not overstepping and interfering in the process. That is what comes from labor peace, which is a good relationship between an employer and a union. And that happens when they're able to be at the table and find an agreement, get a deal, and do what's good, and hopefully do that without labor disruption. That's not what happened. It was an introducing of this, you took away that, and then it's like, oh, unpaid, CUPE has had a great campaign, unpaid work, won't fly, for a year. We, you can talk to people on planes and they've heard about it, and suddenly the government learned yesterday that unpaid work was a problem. It's going to be an issue. We need to see a government that is not going to hold up, CEOs and, profitable businesses on the backs of workers. We need them to stand up and step up and, show up for workers.
So you want Section 107 gone.
Yes.
I know it's also being taken to court by the unions, but you would like the government to get rid of it before it even has to go through the whole court system, is what you're saying.
Ure, like we've seen in the last...
Is there fear that they will invoke it again?
Well, they've invoked it so many times in the last year, right? We saw it...
I was going to ask about that in terms of the pushback this time. What do you think is the difference in terms of the pushback compared to the previous times, whether we're talking rail workers or Canada Post? Yeah. Why was this the moment of defiance and also all the unions saying, whoa, that's enough? Why this moment?
Well, I mean, we're democratic organizations, and this time the workers were like, we are not going to go back. They made that decision. The union was backing them. They had the ability. That's why it is this moment. But it's also the first time, the second time. I think people are doing what's best for their members to get a deal. That's what they're going to show up and do every time. And the labor movement is united behind this, right? Like, we've had an emergency meeting. Everybody's on that call. Everybody is there. Everybody's showing up because we know that the right to strike is fundamental to the balance of power that needs to happen when you have a union. This totally undermined that, and I think it really showed how bad, because it wasn't introduced after there was an impasse. It was introduced within hours, assuming that they're trusting one side, but not listening to the other side about, actually, we're going to get a deal.
Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That was Siobhán Vipond with the Canadian Labour Congress. U.S. President Donald Trump is pushing towards a trilateral summit with the Russian and Ukrainian presidents. Can Trump negotiate an end to Russia's war with Vladimir Putin in the room? Up next, Canada's former ambassador to Russia, Jeremy Kinsman. Prime Minister Mark Carney met with fellow world leaders today in support of Ukraine. The Coalition of the Willing gathered virtually and discussed yesterday's meeting in the Oval Office with U.S. President Donald Trump. Uncertainty remains about what security guarantees the U.S. is promising Ukraine. The White House press secretary confirmed Trump will not be putting American boots on the ground in Ukraine and said that accommodations are underway for a meeting between the Russian and Ukrainian presidents.
In order to learn, in order to move the ball forward with diplomacy and towards peace, you have to have open dialogue. And so that's why the president has had several conversations by phone and, of course, an in-person meeting last Friday with President Putin. He also has talked to President Zelensky dozens of times, had him here at the White House yesterday, and he's understanding what both sides want, what both sides are going to have to give up. And he has always said, in order to get a good deal, both sides are going to have to walk away a little bit unhappy.
But there was no relief overnight from the fighting. This is the aftermath of Russian drone and missile strikes in Ukraine as part of Russia's largest attack on Ukraine this month. Jeremy Kinsman previously served as Canada's ambassador to Russia. Mr. Kinsman, we saw Russia continue to attack Ukraine overnight. What do you make of Russia's current strategy?
Well, what I make of it, Karina, I think is that it is unchanged over the last 10 years. Russia has a psychological, or I should say Putin has a psychological obsession with the notion that Ukraine even exists, that Ukraine exists as a sovereign, independent, and potentially very successful country. He can't stand it. He believes it's part of something he calls Russian state civilization. He's never accepted its separation from Russia in 1991, and he's relentlessly he did begin to pursue its total occupation by Russia. He failed, but he's not giving up on what he's got, and he wants a little more. He has no respect for Zelensky. He's never met him in person over these last several years, and I doubt that he'll do it now.
So I think from your answer there, I can guess at what your answer will be for this question, because on Friday you said Putin wasn't going to be interested in a ceasefire, is not interested in a ceasefire. So, and we've obviously seen there is no ceasefire, but is he interested? Is there any chance that he would be interested in peace?
Yeah, peace on his terms. He'd love a wonderful, peaceful Ukrainian territory as part of his kingdom. That's the kind of peace he wants. I don't think that he is interested in peace. He's interested in subjugation. I mean, he is a person who exercises power to obtain his ends, and by power I mean force, and that's what he's doing. And I think it's highly naive of some of the players in this exercise, to doubt that. Trump continuously says that I know Vladimir, he's been my friend for years, and I know he's a man of peace and he will seek peace. Well, you won't find a single member of the, whatever it is today, 34 million strong Ukrainian population who would validate that thought. They're terrified of him. And that's why, even if there were a ceasefire, and he doesn't want one, make no mistake about it, but let's say he gets one because he's getting something else out of it. The fear on the part of the Ukrainians, Karina, is that it's just a temporary peace. He'll just use the time to build up his forces to attack again. And that's why security guarantees were discussed in Washington yesterday, almost to the exclusion of anything else. They didn't get anywhere. I mean, Trump made ambiguous statements about whether the United States was in or was not in. We heard no boots on the ground. But then we heard that possibly air support, long-range air support, missile support, intel, tech, these things, and of course military equipment. But it wasn't confirmed. What is clear, and Marco Rubio confirmed it on Sunday when speaking to television, is that Trump isn't going to exercise any coercive power on Putin, who invaded Ukraine, which Trump still seems somehow not to get, that coercive pressure for him to call it off and to get into a ceasefire or get into a serious and just negotiation.
So I have to ask, if from everything you've said, if we don't think, we know there's not going to be U.S. boots on the ground, you've talked about sort of what kind of security guarantees we could have then from the U.S. Europe is clearly all about the security guarantees right now and how they could be part of it. If that is all, I guess I wonder whether we're being duped. Is everyone being duped? And talking about what we think a peace deal would look like and what it could involve if we're dealing with a leader and a country that actually has no notion of going in that direction.
Well, isn't it funny? You don't think about this stuff all the time, but you've managed to lap the U.S. negotiating team completely. Of course, we're being duped. I mean, that's what Putin does. And he plays for time. He's ragging the puck. He's trying to avoid American sanctions. Don't forget, just 2 weeks ago, or even a week ago, Trump was saying unless he agrees to a truce and ends this war now, there are going to be very serious consequences. He met Putin, spent some time with him in Alaska, his friend Vladimir. And when he came out, he said, no, ceasefire is a terrible idea. We won't do that. And you know, there's been no mention of any coercive force on Russia at all. There's going to have to be some. And there are lots of things that the Europeans and the Americans can do together. Meanwhile, you led your segment with a report of this virtual meeting of the potential members of the Coalition of the Willing, which I think is up to about 30 countries, in which Canada is an important part.
Well, I was going to ask you, where is Canada all this? We are obviously a part of it. Maybe if we're talking about being duped, it's a question that's moot. But let's say we're not being duped, and there is a peace deal at some point. What role can Canada play in getting there? And then, if there is one, what role would Canada possibly play in helping that continue?
Well, you got to separate in time and in substance, Karina, two things: a ceasefire, okay, no more killing, stop the killing. On the lines of demarcation now, no doubt. That's the first stage. Getting a peace deal, an enduring peace deal, means dealing with the issues that separate the countries. So there you're talking about borders, you're talking about recognition, you're talking about all kinds of things that I suspect are going to take years to solve. You know that Russia and Japan had a bit of a war at the end of the Second World War, and Russia snatched the Kuril Islands, which are just along the top of Japan there. And when's that? 80 years ago? They never solved it. There's still no peace. The Second World War between Japan and Russia theoretically continues. You know, so what Canada's got to do, it's got to be part of the credible security backup for Ukraine in the event there's a ceasefire. If there's a ceasefire, we all have to help Ukraine be able credibly to resist it. Now, listen, Ukraine's got an army right now of 900,000 people. I think it's the biggest army in Europe, certainly about 15 times bigger than Canada's. What they need, though, they need credible sort of long-range support. They need defensive systems like Patriots. They need intelligence. They need tech. They need a lot of things, and that is what Canada would be involved in. If that truce holds and negotiations start, and it does lead toward a peace deal, an enduring peace deal, then that is going to have to be reinforced and sort of almost institutionalized, and that's where this discussion of Article 5 type guarantees would click in, but you know that's getting pretty hairy, frankly.
And it's also, I guess, probably getting a bit far down the road. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much, former Ambassador Jeremy Kinsman. Now, Pierre Poilievre is headed back to Ottawa, this time as a Conservative Member of Parliament for Alberta. The Power Panel is here to talk about what his return to the House of Commons will look like. Conservative leader Pierre is heading back to Parliament. His by-election win in Battle River Crowfoot sets the stage for his return to his role of leader of the official opposition.
Conservatives will fight to put Canada first, and we will work with anyone from any party. We continue to extend our hand to Mr. Carney and say that we want to work with any party to put an end to the tariffs and get a fair deal for Canada. In fact, we're proposing solutions, nonpartisan solutions, that will help strengthen Canada's hand.
When MPs return to the House of Commons on September 15th, Poilievre will square off with Prime Minister Mark Carney in question period for the first time. Can Canadians expect those extended hands and nonpartisan solutions to last as Parliament gets down to business? Let's talk about this with the Power Panel. Emily Nicolas is a columnist for Le Devoir. Michelle Cadario was Deputy Chief of Staff to former Prime Minister Paul Martin. And here with me is Kate Harrison, a Conservative political analyst. Welcome to you all.
Good to be here.
Kate first. Let's start with you. Pierre Poilievre says he's willing to work with the Liberals on nonpartisan solutions. Is this a new era for the Conservative leader?
I still think the main responsibility of holding the government to account will be the chief concern of the opposition leader. It's in the name, but we already have seen a few signals that the Conservatives do want to try and work together on items that make sense for both parties. You saw them support C5, the National Infrastructure Bill, before the House recessed for the summer. And I think that's the type of thing that really does elicit cross-party consensus. There's a mutual interest in seeing energy infrastructure get built. Does that mean we have a kumbaya love-in from the fall onward? I doubt that very much, but I do think that we are in a moment where a lot of Canadians want to see constructive solutions. National infrastructure is one, and so I think we should take Mr. Poilievre at his word that he is equally interested in proposing some solutions that would benefit Canadians during this critical moment.
Okay, we'll see how long that lasts.
Yeah, I give it at least a few weeks.
Okay, at least. Michelle, I want to also ask you about the Liberal candidate in the by-election. Darcy Spady only hit 4.3%. He was behind the independent candidate, Bonnie Critchley, who had nearly 10%. And as we know, Poilievre won with more than 80%. Should Liberals read anything into that?
No, I don't think so. It was an off by-election. It was, kind of an expectation for sure that Pierre Poilievre was going to win it. That is never, it might surprise you, it's never been a target riding for the Liberal Party, and I doubt in my lifetime it ever will be. And I think that there's, when you're having a second chance election, there was kind of probably an understanding of a lot of Canadians that he was going to be given his seat back in another seat in the House of Commons, and he ran in probably the safest place in the country, and he was awarded with that win.
And Emily, how does this election position, or this by-election position Poilievre for his leadership review early next year in January? Did the numbers matter in terms of how much support he got?
It does. I also think that there's some other people internally who are not necessarily taking the fall fully, but being shifted around to allow Conservatives who are disappointed with the last election results to have someone else to direct that disappointment at. I'm thinking, for example, of Jenny Byrne, who was running the national campaign. That also helps. In terms of the fall, I think that the one metric I'm going to be looking at for actually the entire year is just how many bills are being adopted, and if the Parliament is actually working. It's not something that we can just feel in the vibes and the attitude, but actually something that we can measure. The parliaments in the last couple of years has been very, very dysfunctional in terms of just getting legislation forward, and we can see whether or not there will be improvement for this in the fall, as well as just looking at the tone of people. I think if we get things ahead, Canadians will feel a difference. There's a lot of different issues that are not necessarily partisan in nature that needs to be addressed. AI, for example, is something that there's a lot of people across different aspects of the political spectrum want to see a lot of legislation on. And so there's a lot of things like this that really demand a parliament to be able to actually function. And as well, in terms of just general tone and attitude, I think that this week the official opposition was QP. and the Air Canada Union. But I think we also need to understand that with the NDP as weak as it is, well, you're likely to also see players outside of Parliament to play more of a role of a challenge to Mark Carney that you had when you had that diversity of voices in Canada presented at Parliament itself.
Well, that's interesting. So Emily mentioned tone, and I want to ask a question about that, but also wrap it into a question about, for example, Air Canada. Yeah. The Conservatives did put out a reminder that they have this legislation about unpaid work, wondering if that would have had more profile if Pierre Poilievre was already the leader of the official opposition. But also, she did mention tone. They're going to square off in the fall for the first time. As collaborative as they might be behind the scenes on getting bills done, do you expect to see a change in tone from what we saw when he squared off against Trudeau? Yeah,
it's a good question. I think that there is a movement around organized labor and trying to court support from labor that has been happening for some number of years now on the Conservative side of the fence. I think, the NDP is not as present on these issues, obviously, as they were prior to the campaign. And I think that is a bigger challenge for their party in terms of reconciling where they sit on these things. And I think that the Conservatives have stepped into a space there where they can draw some credible contrast with the Prime Minister on labor issues. And I think this week is a really good example of that. I do think that contrast is the key word here. And there is a lot of contrast between Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Carney. I think Mr. Carney has had a considerably long honeymoon, but we still find ourselves in the fall, without a trade deal, without much more to say on housing, without any of those national infrastructure projects. So I think Canadians want to see solutions come forward and see that kind of proactive approach on the part of the opposition and all parliamentarians. But at the end of the day, the opposition's job is to hold the government to account. And I think this past summer gives the Conservatives quite a bit of material to work with in terms of the Liberals not having yet lived up to many of their campaign promises.
Michelle, in terms of if there is sort of this common ground on some things, whether we're talking about getting infrastructure built or even, new immigration targets, bail reform, before Conservatives had the access to a lot of wedge issues that they could use against Trudeau. If there's more common ground, is it going to be more difficult for them to find those wedge issues? Do they just wait out Carney and the honeymoon period for when that honeymoon period ends? What do you think?
Well, I think that it actually goes beyond a traditional honeymoon period this time. It's because Canada is in a state of crisis, right? Like we have been in this state of uncertainty, in huge economic turmoil since Donald Trump came in with his new tariffs not long after he was sworn in just in January. And so I actually think that it's because that we are in state, there's so much chaos in uncertainty, that the expectation of Canadians is just different. It is about kind of, pulling up our socks and working together. And I think that, that's what Poilievre 2.0 is probably going to, reface himself in terms of how he presents himself in Parliament. I think that I think the government's going to be different because it's going to be welcoming that. Right, and so I think that cooperative spirit is less to do with the honeymoon and much more to do with actually meeting Canadians' expectations. This isn't a time where constant political bickering and kind of nastiness works, or holding up the Parliament and and it's both sides. I'm fully acknowledging that it was both sides prior to the last election. But I don't think that flies anymore. And so we'll have to see how it goes as we go forward.
I think we've just lost our Michelle here briefly. Hopefully we can get her reconnected. Emily, in terms of the actual by-election, it was this long-form ballot movement with more than, I think it was 214 people's name, more than 100 independents. Most couldn't even vote for themselves because they don't live in the riding. So, more than 100 got 0 votes. Is this the end of that movement, do you think?
I don't think there's going to be an end to people trying to have electoral reform in this country as long as there is not going to be electoral reform.
But is that the form it will keep taking, do you think?
I think it has evolved already in a sense that for the election in Carterton, you had the longest ballot ever. Now, this time around, Election Canada found a different way to deal with it. And so already it's evolving in terms of Election Canada's response to this form of civilian, I guess, right to express what they feel about just the electoral process itself, as well as about specific candidates and ideologies. And so I think this is what's going on, and that Election Canada is likely to keep on working on how they respond to it. I don't think that the movement is going to go away. It's something that we've seen for generations in different shapes or form. And so there's a lot of people who want to put their names on the ballots because they think that the thing itself is absurd, and so they're going to be doing it for absurd reason, and they're going to call it that, a political party, and that is a way to make a point. As long as there is no way to vote blank in Canada, there's going to be people coming up with funky ways of allowing people to actually do that. I don't expect that to stop. And you know what? I think that's part of what democracy is for, and that's also part of what Election Canada is supposed to figure out. And I think they've done this well this time around.
Now, Michelle, Emily already talked about sort of what she's looking for, at least from Pierre Poilievre this fall in the House of Commons. September 15th is really not that far away. What are you looking for when the House comes back?
Well, I am very much looking to see which Pierre Poilievre shows up. Is it really the version 2.0, a much less name calling, less nastiness, and actually with a true spirit of collaboration? Is Mark Carney going to continue with, the demeanor and the tone that he set in the first kind of few weeks of Parliament, or is he going to kind of give in to and become much more political and partisan as we kind of go forward?
Okay, a little visual technical problem. Kate, what are you looking for in the House beyond whether we see a 2.0 Pierre Poilievre?
Yeah, I think you had mentioned earlier wedge issues, and I think there are wedge issues there for the opposition to seize. Highlighting some of what Mr. Carney promised during the campaign that has not come to fruition, is some of that. I think there's wedge issues to be found on housing. I think there's wedge issues to be found around crime and immigration. A lot of these areas that Canadians have highlighted as being points of concern that Conservatives have proposals to, and that the current government is not acting on. So I think that, while the tone right now, or the focus right now, is on a lot of those international issues and the trade dispute, I think that the farther we go without an agreement, and the more people's affordability crisis comes into clear focus, the Conservatives and the Liberals are going to have a pretty robust exchange about who's got the right plan for people, and I think the Conservatives are going to provide that contrast with Pierre back in the House.
Okay, we don't have a lot of time left. Emily, maybe in 30 seconds to a minute, what you're looking for from Pierre Poilievre. Everyone keeps talking about that, but this will be also the first time, really, other than in debate nights during the election, that Mark Carney squares off against him. What do you look for?
I'm looking forward to see Mark Carney evolve in the midterm and the long term. The man is still relatively new to politics. His job has been very much focused on the executive side of things so far. He hasn't been as talkative or expressive as some other prime ministers. He's just keeping his answers short, which is coming from a bureaucratic background. But the theatrics of political question period can grow on people. And so I'll see if his personality actually evolves over the last couple of months, and what Canadians actually make of that.
Thank you very much, all of you, for your perspectives. Emily Nicolas, Michelle Cadero, and Kate Harrison. I'm Karina Roman. Thank you for watching Power and Politics. More on CBC News Network. Stay right there.